Welcome to Clock Into Your Calling, inspiring believers to live out their faith every day, not just on Sundays. This podcast is dedicated to help you break the sacred secular divide, sharpen your gifts, and take intentional steps that honor God. Discover how pastors, professionals, and industry leaders live faithfully, cultivate lasting change, and advance the kingdom of God. Thank you for joining us. If you find this helpful or know someone who would, please share, subscribe, and leave a like or comment below. God bless and enjoy the episode.
Hey guys, welcome into another episode of Clock Into Your Calling. I'm joined here by my good friend, Zach. What an amazing year it has been just for him. He got married this year. What an awesome achievement. Zach is also an editor at The Athletic. He's got his master's degree. He's got his bachelor's degree. We've actually met in college, man, a few years ago now. It's crazy how fast time goes, but it's so amazing that we've stayed connected through this time. And that's a story of its own, just long distance over 5 or 6 years. Zach, my man, how you feeling today, brother?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
It's great to be here. I'm so proud of you for, starting this podcast, just doing God's work, bringing people and relationships closer to Jesus. That's what we're told to do. We're called to go out and make disciples and communicate our faith to others. And this is an example of that. So, so thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure. And I'm pumped for this conversation.
Yeah. Speaking of that conversation, today we got our topic, sacred rhythms, aligning rest, work, and God. And I know it's so difficult nowadays. There's so many things pulling for our attention, and we want to just go ahead and look at. And I couldn't think of a better example of who to talk about this with someone whose schedule changes frequently, bi-monthly, where you don't even know when you're working. You can't even get on a sleep schedule. You just got married. I know you guys are looking to do certain things, potentially buying a house. There's so much change going on in your life right now. And I can't wait for this conversation because we're going to talk about how to align these things no matter what season that you're in. And I really want to go back to those college days a little bit. And I wanted to hear a little bit about your story, Zach. Like, when did you kind of become a Christian? Were you always a Christian? Like, is this something that's newer to you? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ian, a great place to start. I think for me, I always grew up a Christian. I grew up in a Christian household. My parents met on a faith basis. They met in a church in New Jersey. My dad was living in New Jersey. My mom was in New York, and she came over to New Jersey across the state line for church and met my dad. And they raised us Christian, but it wasn't always put on us. And I think that's what my brother and I both respected. My brother is 2 years older than me. His name's Trevor. Shout out Trevor. He we both always stayed in the faith realm, but we appreciated the simple fact that it was never pushed upon us. Christianity and faith, our spirit. We went to church basically every week, I'd say, for the most part, unless we had a basketball tournament or maybe somebody's sick. We're not being forced to go to church. And sometimes, there'd be an occasion time we miss for, going out to a family breakfast or something together. I'm just taking a week off or something. But for the most part, we were always going to church. But then again, it wasn't beating us. It wasn't involving going to small groups, during the week and doing a weekly service, or maybe, a youth group, or even taking like a ministry trip. There wasn't anything like that involved. It was just kind of going to church, kind of staying around it just enough to kind of understand, ask questions when you don't understand.
Yeah. And
that's kind of where, where my faith stems from. And from there, I guess really as a teenager, I started the basic, more basic nuances of my faith, which I'm sure we'll get into. But the basis of it, I would say, starts from my parents.
Yeah. I mean, I know so much of our faith and our, just the way where we are in life and just in general, we live out so many things that we learned as a child. And that's why it's so, fortunate enough for myself. I know I would say you're in the same boat too, to have great parents. And that's why, all the parents out there, you have a great responsibility to invite that faith into your household, because that's your children are going to see how you're living out, not just what you're saying, but how you're actually living. And it's so amazing that we both were kind of in the same spot there. And we just, we can see those things come into fruition now, really, when you take a step back and look for it. 1 second. All right, let's go ahead and get into the questions. I know the camera looks a little bit different. We are having some technical difficulties. This is what happens when you get somebody unexperienced with this kind of stuff, still learning. So we're sorry about that. You get a different angle of me. You can't see the cool backgrounds I designed, but that's okay. Y'all are here for the content, not the background. So I really want to get in this conversation, the sacred rhythms, and like how you're kind of aligning those things that we talked about. So we know that you work in journalism, The Athletic. It's your new job. You're working remote now. How long have you been there again?
Yeah, I've been there since October, so we're coming up on a year here.
Man, I feel like just yesterday we were talking about, trying to find out if that was the right opportunity for you, and it's already been a year, and that's amazing. So the thing I want to ask you is, in that fast-paced environment that you're working in, like sports journalism, how do you maintain that integrity and really just serve others around you, your boss, your coworkers, through your faith?
Yeah, that's a good question because it's tricky, right? It's
Mm,
tricky, especially when you're in a remote environment because everyone's
yeah.
kind of working at their own pace. And what I mean by that is everybody is in their own natural flow, depending on where you're working. Friday, I went to recording this on a Saturday, so just one day prior, I took my laptop and worked at a coffee shop. So that sometimes work looks like that, where
Hmm.
you're at a coffee shop and you're working there. So maybe the flow is a little bit different than what you would be doing at home. For anyway, but for what I do, I just try to keep that integrity. When we're in meetings, when we're working with writers, especially. For me personally, what I love about working from home is being able to sometimes take a break from work if I
Mm,
feel stressed or overwhelmed, and just take some time to talk to God, or if I'm overwhelmed or stressed, or if there's a meeting I'm anxious or worried
mm,
about, how it's going to go, whether it involves content we're writing, or whether it's just a face-to-face interaction about something that's going on
mhm.
within our team. I just try to keep my faith and integrity there, try to be gentle and kind and compassionate. Like our writers and other teammates or other editors as well get caught up in the fast-paced environment of how things flow, and sometimes just giving a nice gesture of
Yeah.
hello, goodbye, or just being compassionate when things are hectic in the workplace, I think is huge. And so I think I just try to hold people accountable for their work, especially writers
Yeah.
and editors as well, but just try to be nice, right? If there's something that maybe I don't agree with, the story pitch, or
Mm,
if there's something that I don't think it was handled the right way and someone asks me about it, give them
mm,
an honest opinion, but
yeah.
nicely, right? Nicely and gently, and like being soft and compassionate. I always try to, even past to spiritual principles, just think about how you would want to be treated.
Mm,
And a lot of times that goes back to like how Jesus treated, his disciples and treated the people around him. He just treated them nicely. However, he was
right.
being treated. And so I think that's what I try to do, especially in a remote environment, is because
Mhm.
like how we communicate is really important. How
Yeah.
your words and how you put them into sentences, how you structure them, and the tone
Yeah.
really matters. So a lot of times, like I said, going back to the Jesus, kind of metaphor and comparison, Jesus, he speaks so softly to us, right?
Mm,
Like when God's talking to us. And so
that's good.
I try to be that gentle and compassionate, even when there's a lot of breaking news and different sports things that are going on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all so good. I mean, what I hear Z, just being honest, sometimes is full time for remote work is 30 hours a week. But no, I'm just joking. I know it. And I love that you started talking about your compassion. And I think that's one of the things that, you do so well with your listening. I think that's one thing that can be overlooked so easily is how we serve and how we talk and how we operate with that integrity. Because oftentimes we think serving is only doing, but it's more than that. It's going to be how you're talking to people, how you're sending your emails, how you're interacting with your coworkers, especially, or when you hear gossip at work. It's so easy to just overlook that. Like a serving just means I have to do something, but serving can also mean like sending positive emails, bringing encouragement. You're working in a secular environment. Not every day, not every someone's going to get that, and I think you can provide that great light in there. And I think that what I kind of want to ask you, kind of following up on that, is how do you manage the opinions of kind of what's going on? Sometimes I feel like on the outside looking into your job, I'm thinking, Stephen A. Smith, and you always want to just have the best, like the edgiest opinion, if I can say that. You always want to have that thing that might not be true, but it's going to get people to look at it. Like, how can you stay clear from that and report the truth, right? Because it's so easy to just want the publicity, you want the influence, the clicks, the clickbait title. But how can you stay true and integrous in those moments where you have an opportunity to either stay true or gain influence or popularity?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think, especially in this day and age of media, obviously,
Mm,
I try to use just my best news judgment and background when it comes to certain things like that. And obviously, I even like use my faith. Like if something doesn't give me like the right spirit or edge around
mm,
something, I may even disagree with somebody that wants to write something in particular about a particular topic, like a Stephen A or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in this day and age too, it's important to realize that our perception of what news is has
Mm-hmm.
changed a whole lot, right? And
Yeah.
so you have to look at something, maybe something gets proposed, let's write this or let's write that. But you have to take a second and actually think, okay, who's this coming from?
Yeah.
Is it
That's good.
actually relevant to a certain sports audience? Because that matters too, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
not just writing to please ourselves or writing to please an audience. We want people to like look at
Yeah.
our content and read it. So I think it's important to look at, who is saying this stuff, what's being said, when was it, where was it, is this
Mm.
is this credible, is it true? So a lot of what we do at The Athletic that I really like is we confirm a lot of the things that we see going on. Sometimes we react later to whatever's breaking news or whatever happens. A football player did this or they did that.
Mm-hmm.
We report back a little bit later because we want to do the digging ourselves. We want to see the
Mm-hmm.
truth behind it. And the beauty that I love behind that is um, being able to say, okay, I went and got the facts myself, so I know
Mm-hmm.
this is true. I went and spoke
Yeah.
with this person instead of saying, well, I'm going to piggyback off of this other media outlet that said this or did that. Sometimes we've had instances where we'll talk to something's happened and we'll have an instance where someone runs to see an article on ESPN and then we'll go and track that information. They're like, no, that's not really true. They're
Right.
kind of just running. They're just running with that kind of for
Mm.
clickbait. And
Yeah.
it's wrong. And some people will say, oh, well, ESPN said this. Is this true? And
Right.
we're like, no, that's not what our sources
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
So I think it's so important to not just piggyback because then you're not really doing the work, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a lot of what our job is just making sure that things are right because
Mm-hmm.
with the ability and freedom that the internet possesses today,
Mm-hmm.
if you have a following, you can go and post just about anything. And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we have to watch out for hacks too, right? If this person got
Mm-hmm.
traded or this person got injured in their off-season workout,
Yeah.
on Memorial Day, and it's like, no, they didn't. They just want clicks. Like that's not true. Like that, don't get your hopes up. So
Who is doing that? Hacking in and saying someone got traded, bro. Gotcha.
right.
Yeah, because like I'm gonna see them getting traded to the Dolphins.
Right.
Patrick Mahomes. But yeah.
And it's like, well,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Or
right.
they do like, bro. What I've been seeing lately too, they always do like this guy is like really close to signing with these people, 5 potential landing spots, and here's why. And I'm like, all right, let me get into this. All right, I'm believing it a little bit. And bro, it makes no sense at all. The contract is there for another 6 years. He's getting $1 billion a month. And like, I'm like, come on, bro. You just made me click on that, get my hopes up just to let me down. So, but I love that you said that you dig into the facts and you verify them because that is just a word for our life and what we need to do because we're similarly to your job, we're getting opinions and people, some people just give us their opinion without even, even asking or just, or we don't ask for it, you know what I'm saying? But people, we have to take all those things captive in order to live our life to please God because it's so easy when we don't do that to please people, to please this world and to please ourselves as well. And it's so hard. But I love that you mentioned that because other people are going to, think they're right and think that they have the truth and everything too. And some people just think they have it, but they don't. But some people are like legitimately could be trying to like manipulate or gain popularity and influence like you were talking about. And well, we talked a little bit about, Jesus operating with that compassion. And I really want to ask you, the only most reliable source of truth that we have is the Bible that we all have access to as human beings. And I was wondering if there was an example biblically that you like to model or emulate yourself, maybe of that service, the leadership, integrity that you try to work for every day that aids you in your pursuit of excellence.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, since I just try to model Jesus in everything that I do, I
Yeah.
wake up every day and I pray, and that's what I pray for, right? And in retrospect, I'm asking Jesus to, help my mind and my heart and my spirit and everything else look like him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to model, Jesus's leadership by just doing, especially in my work, just doing whatever it takes. A lot of times in media, people think, what I do as a sports editor is, well, first off, they get it wrong sometimes. They call me a sports writer. I'm not a writer. I can't write. I have the
Well,
ability to, but I don't.
help us real quick distinguish those, so we're not like that person real quick. Can you help us real quick?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
So sports writers, and it differs at every level, right? I was a sports editor at my last job, which is at a newspaper, and
Okay.
I wrote sports. I went to high school games. I wrote sports
Mm-hmm.
articles, a bunch of them. I would go to games. I would interview players and coaches and write feature articles. That's mainly what a sports writer does. But in my role at the
Okay.
newspaper, I was the sports editor. And what the sports editor typically does at a outlet, media company or outlet like The Athletic, is sports editors are working behind the scenes to help writers look good. So the stuff that you
Okay.
might see on ESPN that someone writes, there are people that have to edit that, and they have to look up the information. If you say, yeah, this Patrick Mahomes to Miami Dolphins trade happened on July 11th in 2022, and let's say you're writing about how something came about in 2025. You want to fact check all of those things. If you're saying Ian Hess went to Wilson College in 2018 and played against Centenary College or something, like we want to be able to confirm that, so that when people like you are reading the content, they can trust that all of that information is right. So that's what editors do. And that's what I love about editing is being able, and you talk about being able to serve, is being able to help writers. I just, got off a shift a couple of hours ago, and there was, we have a couple auto racing writers, and one of them submitted a story about how, the NASCAR Cup Series is moving from the sponsorship of Xfinity to, I believe it's Riley Auto Parts, O'Reilly Auto Parts. And he was writing some stuff in there. Like, the writers aren't perfect, right? And so you have to fact check them, make sure, okay, like, did this happen? Sometimes they'll reference this deal that happened back in February of 2023. Well, no, it actually happened in March of 2023. You got the date wrong, right? Maybe they're rushing their writing. So you can't trust them. Like, there's a certain level of trust with some things, right? Like, if we're reporting breaking news about, someone being traded or something, you try to be as fast as you can, but you have to be able to respond and look up dates and names and fact check. But anyway, just a little bit, that's a little bit, out of the realm a little bit, but yeah, that's all that, I say all that to say a sports editor basically helps the writers look good. They can write, and they do. Sometimes I write breaking news, but that's not my main job. My main job is to help, writers look good, make sure the punctuation's good, that their facts are right, that the story flows, so that you're not, if I tell you Patrick Mahomes got traded, you're not trying to figure out who got traded and when the deal's being official. That's not the last paragraph of the story, right? You want to know all the facts early on. And so us editors make sure that you all know that, and then that the writers look good. That's the main point. And so that kind of ties into one of your questions of, like, and what I kind of wanted to get into of just portraying Jesus's leadership, right?
Yeah.
Just taking a writing piece, or when you're reading something and trying to find ways to just help out, right? Just say, hey, like, can I help you here? Or how can I make this story better? Like, do you need help? Where are you stuck? When I think of that, I think about different passages in the Bible where Jesus is, he's washing people's feet. He's trying not to, not trying. He's not doing, his disciples wrong, or people who wrong him. He's not retaliating, right? Like, he's righteous. He's doing whatever's needed. Not a lot, but sometimes what my day looks like, right?
Yeah.
It looks as, okay, we're going to go into this work day with this mindset, or it's the fall, and I'm going to say, okay, we've got NFL content to be working on, but maybe there's another story that pops up, and there's an opportunity to write, and my boss says, hey, like, who wants to write this? And I've had opportunities where no one's wanted to do something, and I said, I'll take a crack at it.
Yeah.
And it's turned out to be a fun story for me to write, and something, my bosses like. And so I think you just have to be willing to take on that perspective and that regime of Jesus's leadership, washing feet, whatever is needed to be done, to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I think, Jesus is ultimately the best example we have of leadership. And I love it because he did different things for different people, right? Just to show that true humility, servant heart, the people that wronged him. You said it best. The people that betrayed him, right? He was still able to go back, and it's so hard for us as humans. Like, we don't naturally want to do that, right? We don't naturally just wake up and be like, I want to serve everybody, you know? We only can get there by aligning our hearts with God each and every day. And I kind of want to ask, how do your daily spiritual habits help you stay kind of grounded and focused, aligning yourself with God kind of each and every day?
Yeah. For me, I think, and that's another good question because um, I think in this day and age, you have to have some sort of spiritual practices to stay in
Yeah.
line with the Bible and God's calling on your life, because it's so easy to get derailed
Mm,
from what you're doing. But I have a few things. I
yeah.
tithe for one. I make sure I do Sabbath for two. And then three, I pray every day. I just
Yeah.
try to do those things consistently. And it's created for me, a lot of room for the Holy Spirit to kind of come in
Mm,
my life and come
it's
into my
good.
heart and change who I am. A lot of times I'll be honest, a lot of people downplay those three tactics, but
Mm,
they keep me grounded. I
yeah.
mentioned earlier in this session that sometimes if I'm stressed, or maybe I'm just exhausted, like, God, I can't get through this day. I have 2 more hours, but we've had a lot of news today and we had a
Yeah.
couple meetings that were like long and they were rough. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. Like, working from home gives me an opportunity to just step away and, say a prayer or maybe just take a
Mm,
breath. But prayer's huge in the mornings. For me, it's about, waking up and just being thankful. I let my dog out and
yeah.
feed him, and then I come upstairs and just kind of just sit there with God, right? And just try to pray to him. I pray to him about what's on my mind and what's on my heart. That way, before anything gets going, before I open my computer, before I even touch my phone, my
Mm,
alarm is usually my watch. So I'm not even touching my phone, and that's not even in the room with me sleeping.
yeah.
The first thing that's on my mind is obviously my dog, because he needs to go out, but also
Yeah.
God, right? And
Yeah.
just being thankful. Sometimes that involves, this time of year right now, watching the sunrise sometimes. But when it's dark out, it's just dark. But it's me and God, and like I take the dog out and bring it back in, and then it's me and God in a private room. I think that
Mm,
prayer is so impactful, and I also use that before I go to sleep, just being able to pray at night, just thank God, right? Just be thankful for whatever's gone down. Some
yeah.
days are long and hard with work and whatever else life may bring. So I think prayer is so important. Like, it just
Yeah.
it goes without saying, but I think a lot of people don't pray enough. I'll admit that sometimes I think I don't pray
Mm,
enough, right? There
mhm,
are moments
mhm,
where I get frustrated where I'm like, I could have just prayed instead of getting frustrated or upset by this
mm,
one thing. But then two is tithing. I think tithing is really important because it shows where your heart is at, that
mm,
it's about more than just you, right? It's about, and that also goes with, how much you want to tithe. They say 10% is a tithe, right? That's what
yeah.
we learn, but that also goes about what's in your heart and what's in
Mm,
your bank account. Like, how generous do you feel to give, to the church? Or, I think tithing goes farther than the church. Maybe there's a homeless guy that you pass, on the way to work every day.
mm,
You just like, you pass him $5 or you buy him a coffee.
mhm,
That's giving too. And like, for me, when I do that, it just opens my heart. I feel like
yeah.
it allows God to be able to pour into me as much as I'm, doing his work. And then lastly, like I said, I just make sure I do Sabbath. That's probably that kind of leads into maybe a later conversation, but
Yeah.
I think rest in a Sabbath is so important to just
Mhm,
honor. Jesus worked 6 days, and then on the seventh day he rested, right?
yeah.
And rest is just, it's a loose term, right?
Mhm,
It's a term that we use so loosely, and everybody, rest is different to everybody, right? Like, rest is different when you're at the gym versus like resting after, like, when you get sick and your parents are like, well,
mhm,
just rest, or like you're going for a run for 15 minutes and it's 80 degrees out. You didn't really realize it was getting humid. So now you're overheating. Well, go rest,
yeah.
but what does rest look like everywhere else? What does rest mean biblically? I think that's so important. And I've been able to define that for myself over the
Mm.
past couple of years, heightening my faith. Just those few things have been really, really important for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I want to really dive into the rest, as we align our work and our rest and God, because I think that rest portion can easily get excluded from our week to week, just daily routines. And honestly, in preparation for this episode, I will admit that I was doing some drawing earlier today. I will have a picture of it to show don't have it right now, but it is arguably the best of the worst thing you've probably ever seen. But honestly, though, I think that especially I feel like as guys, like we're always in the performance base. It was nice to do something that I don't have to be the best at or just try to do something else. Like I just want to do something I suck at just to like, and honestly, like a little humility too. But the rest is so important. And I really want to talk about how your rest impacts your work, because it's so easy to just kind of schedule something. And I kind of want to hear what you have to say. And I have someone to follow up too on how we can be intentional about the rest, because it's not just it's intentional rest. Because I sometimes, for myself at least, when I'm resting and I just turn on the TV for 30 minutes, it's like literally like I hit skip a 30 minutes of my life, but I don't feel rested after. There's certain activities that actually fill you in our rest or just kind of skip time. And I think that we have to all know what that's like for us. And I kind of want to hear what are those rest activities for you. So I know you mentioned it's kind of some of your routines that you have. What about actually for the rest? Like what's the Zach cup filler activities if you have a couple to share?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I think for me, I'll start off by just admitting that I used to have a love-hate relationship with rest. I love it now, but I used to have it would be a 50-50 relationship, and 50 being, being hating it, just because because you always feel like, especially at this age, I'm not sure how you feel, but at this age, you always feel like you can be doing something, right? Oh, the dishes, I just sat down, cleaned the house. Yeah, but the dishes need done. Yeah, I just got home from work, but the dog needs taken out, right? Oh, I didn't play with the dog today, right? So, I didn't exercise yesterday. Yeah, but I need to exercise, right? So it's like you always feel like you need to be doing something. So that's kind of what what used to get me a lot is like, I need to be doing something. But I think what's important about rest, and as you noted too, I love your language around it, is the intentionality.
Yeah.
You can rest and just sit down. I was technically resting all day, as I was working. I'm just
Don't
sitting.
Don't tell your boss that.
I'm sitting. I'm sitting at a desk. For most people, some people, their work looks like going out, maybe like you might be going out to a construction site. You're on your feet all day, maybe, right? You're working. But my work is I'm sitting at home at a desk like I am right now, but I'm still working, right? It still involves, I have to look for news. When writing comes in, I have to be ready to edit, right? My mind has to be sharp. I'm still working. It's a different type of work, but I'm working. So I say all that to say, like, rest is all about the intentionality. For me, that means, taking a break from my daily routines, whether that's working out or like or sometimes too, like the social media, going on social media. So taking a break from that for a day. For me, especially, what's really, really impactful is, for me, on my Sabbath days for rest, I don't look at any sports content. It used to be that, oh, I'm not going to check my work email. But now that I work for The Athletic, I'm also a fan of The Athletic. I love our writers than I did before I worked there. So it's so easy for me to just kind of open the app. And they have this new game as well. It's called Sports Connections. So if you're not subscribed to The Athletic, this is not a promo. Please, please subscribe.
Settle down. We can talk about this.
But no, seriously though, they have a sports game called Sports Connections, and basically you just connect, basically you're trying to put 4 sports words in a category. So maybe you might have like football, nachos, and pizza and drinks. So then like that, so there's a category for that, and you're like tailgate foods or tailgate items, right? Or you might have, I don't know, like tent, lawn chair, maybe a football game in there, and then like popcorn, and you're like college football game day.
Gotcha.
So they have that game's kind of challenging. It's fun. So they have like stuff like that too. So it's like you could easily just use it like another social media, and I could spend 15 or 20 minutes up there without really knowing it.
Yeah.
So for me, that's taking a break from all sports content. I'm not watching sports. I'm not reading sports. I'm not doing sports games. And that intentionality then moves my focus to say, okay, what else I can do? So sometimes I take a break and say, okay, I'm not going to read sports content, but I'll read a book that I recently bought that I'm still, working on and stuff. Just like I said, the intentionality is huge. And again, I feel like that again creates more room for God to kind of move in my life. And just kind of open you up to say, okay, because time is so important too, right? How you spend your time. Like if you're scrolling a TikTok or an Instagram, for 15 minutes. Well, on that one Sabbath day, that's taken away from me,
Mm,
right? And so maybe that 20 minutes for me is reading now, or maybe it's I'm going to get to bed 20 minutes earlier today
mm,
instead of scrolling on my phone. And so a
right.
lot of times that rest leaves me refreshed and rejuvenated, because then my focus is on whatever God's calling me to do that day. I've had Sabbath days as well though too, where I've
Mm,
been invited to maybe go, catch up with some friends and grab a drink. And a lot of times that's looked like, hey, I'll come sit with you here, at the restaurant or the bar or whatever.
mm,
But for me, I'm not going to drink. I'll sit here and sip on a Sprite or something or water. But I'm not going to break that, like, that Sabbath. That's another one for me. I didn't mention is, just not having a drink. Some other days I like to, have a drink maybe after a long day or something.
mhm,
But for me, that involves not even doing that. Just kind of, like I said, just kind of relaxing, just
yeah,
easing my mind, allowing God's peace to kind of flow through me.
mm,
Maybe the most strenuous thing I try to do is maybe I'll clean my house if it's, if I notice it's really dirty. But even then,
yeah,
for the most part, it's just little things here and there. And I think it's so important, because then I know I can get rest and
mm,
start my next day with my mind cleared. And
yeah,
then one other thing with my Sabbath is just being able to open up. I have a yearly devotional book with a different devotion each day.
mm,
So focusing on that more, I try to
yeah,
look at that in the morning, obviously when I read, and then at night, I add at least one more look at that around lunchtime. And I try to sit down and say, okay, like what did we learn today? What did we
yeah,
kind of discuss, and see where I can, put my focus for the rest of the day. And that helps a lot as well.
yeah. And those are all, that's so cool that you do that and you know yourself. And I think the part I want to focus in on just for 1 second is that you touched on kind of, changing with what God's presented in your life. And I think that's when your rest can turn into religion, because I know this happens to me sometimes where I'm always like, all right, I scheduled this activity. This is my rest. I'm going to do it regardless. But then I'm like missing the point. Like sometimes I feel like I only do things because they're like in my schedule. And that's kind of what it comes to. You have to know yourself. And I think we all have different ways to rest. Like some of us do physical work, some of us do more mental work. So everybody has different ways to Sabbath, to rest, to fill you up. The most important thing I feel like to do when you're trying to find out what's that for you is don't look left and right at other people. Look to God and look in the mirror, really, like what's it for you? It doesn't have to be the same as everybody else. We can have two separate rest days, right? They don't have to be copy and pasted. And that's just, I feel like a great point, because it can easily slip into that religion where I have to do this, I have to schedule this and do this. And that's the kind of point I want to land on too, is that sometimes it's hard to say no on rest day, right? Like you had the example of when your friends say, "Hey, Z, you want to get a drink?" But you're like, I didn't plan anything, but that's like for a reason. Like that's to not have anything. And I think sometimes you can get guilted in. They're like, and then guys too. They're like, come on, Z, we could just one." And then it turns into 5 hours out.
Right.
And like just the next day is ruined.
Yeah.
But I think that's where there's different strategies, right? You can plan your rest, right? Some days, I remember in the beginning, because sometimes it's hard to say no, just go ahead in your Google Calendar and plan your rest. Go ahead and put intentional rest. Don't plan anything, right? Go in there and do what works for yourself in order to say, no, and you can just be like, hey, I got something planned already. And you're not lying to them. You have rest planned, because you know that that's what you need to take care of yourself so you can be good. Because if you're not filled up with God and the Holy Spirit and rest, you're not able to dump anywhere, because you're empty. And that one yes could be the thing that's like, holding you back, or a few of them. Cause I know it could not be just one. And I want to go ahead and land on this final question for you, Z, and then we're going to encourage the listeners kind of to align these and apply these to their own life. And I want to talk about what's the hardest part of maintaining these rhythms, right? I know you mentioned your career, your time, your shifts change, right? And some of us, I'm just like, give me my 9 to 5, right? Give me my consistent schedule. I always, do this and that. But your schedule's always changing. You probably can't even adapt a sleep schedule. Like we talked about all the different transitions. You're just now married, which is an amazing thing. I got to go to your wedding. We had a blast. Definitely stayed up too late then, but that was for a good. I didn't have rest plans, so we're all good there. So what's like the hardest part of keeping that sacred rhythm of, rest, even though it's changing?
Yeah, that's a really good question to finish up with. I think the hardest part of keeping up with the sacred rhythm, especially
Hmm.
in a changing schedule, is understanding that you have to be able to compromise some things.
Mm,
I just came off working night shifts the past couple of months, and
Mhm.
so I'll let it be known that my rhythms didn't change. But, my wife Bethany, she's great. She goes to goes to work at 7:30 in the morning.
Mhm.
So if I'm working a 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. night shift, I'm still getting up at 7 o'clock for the dog, by the way.
Wow.
And so
God bless your
so
heart,
maybe
Z.
I know, right?
That was me. That dog's going out at 3 a.m. and then I'm going to sleep.
So I think, I think it's just being able, I guess, to be open and to
Mm.
compromise some of your lifestyle. Right now, it works perfectly. I go to work today was a Saturday. I worked from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's great. I've got my evening. It's still light outside, but I think being able to sacrifice your time. I
Mhm.
only get 5 hours of sleep, and I know that ahead of time, right? I know that just like, your intentionality behind the rest, right? You know
Mhm.
these things.
Mhm.
You just have to find a way to figure out and navigate how you're going to get around them. And
Yeah.
so I think, like I said, the hardest part is just compromising, learning how to shift your schedule. That even goes with like
Mhm.
church, right? There are some Sundays where I'll admit that I can't go to church because I'm working. For instance, next Sunday, there's a Little
Mhm.
League World Series championship. Not sure when this is coming out, but that article will be out if you're a subscriber to The Athletic.
Hey,
But
hey.
but but anyway, so that championship falls on a Sunday at 3 o'clock.
Mhm.
So my boss, has me working before then as well. And then I'll be on set at the championship game as well. And so that falls on a day where I can't go to church. There's some
Mhm.
days where I'm working from home and I can't be in person at church, but what can I do? Right. I think
Yeah.
that's the big question you have to ask yourself is, what can I do today to serve God? What can
Yeah.
I do to show my faith? Well, if I'm working on a Sunday, I can still, and I'm at home, I can still plop my TV on, right? I can still,
Mhm.
I can still push a button and allow my ears to listen for, some worship music, to my pastor's voice and what word is being spoken.
Yeah.
Just because I'm not in the building doesn't mean that I can't be a receiver of the word, or
Mhm.
if I can't be a receiver of his voice. I think that intentionality is really,
Mm.
really important. So being able to keep up with your sacred rhythm, I think is, it involves compromise for one, but then two, just being able to be adaptable to change,
Mm.
especially in my, I'm not going to lie. There are times where I wish I did just work a 9 to 5. I'm like,
Mhm.
this is beautiful. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so you kind of just have to balance those things.
Mhm.
But no, but truthfully, I think it is about just sacrifice and
Mhm.
adjusting your rhythm, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not a rhythm. To me, it's not a rhythm until you're thrown out of rhythm. And then you
Mhm.
can really see if it's a rhythm for you, because then
Mm.
it'll feel uneasy. And it did. But then after a while, working at 6 to 2 is
Yeah.
prayer is not at 6:30 in the morning, obviously, because I just went to bed at 2, but then prayer's at 10:30. It's still the same amount of time.
Yeah.
God is still God, but it's just a little bit of a different rhythm.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm listening to a church sermon on a Monday morning via a podcast after getting off of my late night shift. Maybe it's
This podcast?
um could be this podcast, or could be through through
I'm
YouTube,
kidding.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
Just listening to different sermons and stuff. Maybe I wasn't able to get to it on a Sunday and I listened to it on Monday. It's still the same sermon. I can still get
Mhm.
the same out of it. I can still hear the same
Yeah.
message. So I just think that's important. And I'll just throw this last little nugget in there to
Mhm.
close. I think for any listeners or anybody just looking to increase their faith, I think the important part is to really just start small,
Mhm.
with whatever sacred rhythm or spirituality mode, I guess, for lack of a better word, that you're trying to put
Mm.
yourself into. For me as a kid, I always pray. I remember praying since I've been 16 years old. Sometimes that was once a day. Sometimes it wasn't always in the morning, but
Mhm.
I do remember praying over big things, over little things. And so I think it's important to just start small, right? Like
Yeah.
the faith can be the size of a mustard seed, and then
Oh.
allow God to grow that, right?
Mhm.
And so I think from there, if you're going to look to increase your faith, you have to start small.
Yeah.
If you're going to start fasting, like, you have to try it one day. You're not going to know if
Right.
you can do it until you do it. If you're trying to pray more, you just, you pray one prayer. If you like, I want to practice resting, say, okay,
Mhm.
I'm going to, like you said earlier, pick this day to rest,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to do anything as tempting as it is. And
Yeah.
I think you really don't know. I don't think you truly know your faith until your limits are tested. And then you say,
Mm.
now I'm operating in God's spirit, because
Yeah.
I'm not only operating by his word and what he's spoken to, maybe to you or maybe just in his word, but then you're also feeling the pressure of the other side, where you
Yeah.
used to be, your old self. That's when you truly know your faith, right? And so
Mm.
I think starting small is underrated. Like, our faith isn't meant to be rushed. So there's no reason to rush. Oh, I want to start praying. By next week, I want to speak in tongues and I want to be able to be on the worship team. None of that has to happen. But what you
Yeah.
can do right now is just get down on your knees and say, God, listen to me.
Yeah.
I don't know where my faith lies. I don't know where I stand, but like, I need you, God.
Yeah.
Or I'm struggling with anxiety, or I don't know which like choice to make, and I need your help. Would you like speak to me and allow my heart to listen to you? Like,
Right.
people think prayer has to be this big, deep thing.
Right.
When pastors are anointed, and pastors, this is the last point and I'll finish, but like, pastors have a lot of experience, right? In
Hmm.
what they do in ministry. And so a lot of times I think people they get tripped up, or they get confused by, I have to make prayers, these long things, and this
Mm.
deep emotional thing where I'm in tears
Mm.
because I'm struggling with this. No, you can
Yeah.
just say, God, this hurts. I was hurt
Yeah.
by this, and I need your help because I don't know how to get over it, or I'm
Mm.
struggling with dealing with this friend, or learning how to talk to my girlfriend because she's talking to this other guy, but I don't know how to tell her that I really like her and that I love the godly woman that she is. God, would you help me?
Hmm.
That it sounds like the simplest thing, but that's what God listens to. And then
Yeah.
if you're open enough and available enough to allow your heart, for him to puncture your heart and to get in it and make it new and holy, I think that is where you can start.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to emphasize one thing that you said. Thanks for sharing all that. I think those are great points. And I think the key thing, and what you said it well, is the adaptability. Because if you try to adapt everything around something that's changing, like your schedule, it's going to be impossible. But if you adapt to something that doesn't change, it's a lot smarter. And what's that thing that doesn't change? It's the word of God, and it's, following Jesus. So it's taking your schedule and taking the word and making that your focal point and your foundation, and everything else stems from that. And I think that's where you live in the alignment that we all so desperately need for our day-to-day faith. And you led me into this last question that I have, really for the listeners to think about: what's one action today that you could make to make your daily routine more intentional and God-centered? And I love the way that you started. It starts little, right? But what's that one thing that you could do? Because tomorrow is usually too late to start, because you won't do it tomorrow. But what's that action you can do today? Like Zach said, just incorporate one extra worship song, listen to something in the car, right? Take something that you don't have to take away something. You can just add it to it, right? Take that time to use it for God, because, everything like that, it makes an eternal difference in that daily obedience to God, as we want to make our Monday through Saturday more like our Sunday mornings. Zach, I'm so honored that you got to take some time to spend it here with me. You're my brother, bro. We had a great time, like I said, at his wedding. I got to speak a little bit at his wedding. I got to share this super embarrassing story. Hopefully, we can get some tape of that. If you want the tape, just let us know. Me roasting Zach for one
Only
of
if
our
you
funny.
subscribe to The Athletic first.
All right. All that's getting cut out anyway. I don't want to hear any of that. But anyways, and I just want to end with this, as we end every podcast with: you've been given a purpose that only you can fulfill. So don't settle for the ordinary, but step into the extraordinary that God wants to do in your life. Thank you guys so much for being here. Zach, love you, bro. Can't wait to do this again
Love you, bro.
sometime.
Absolutely, bro. Love you, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching. See you next time.